You're useless. You can't even handle simple chores or take care of the kids, let alone pay for alimony. Those were the first words Huxley said when he finally showed up at the hospital 3 weeks after my car accident. He didn't ask how I was or show the slightest concern. As I lay there in the hospital bed, his cold words hit me harder than the accident itself. At first, I thought Huxley had come to visit me out of worry or love. But it didn't take long for him to prove me wrong. I sighed deeply. To be honest, I had already been thinking about divorce for a while. I didn't expect him to bring it up, but in a strange way, it felt like a relief. It was like he'd done me a favor. Fine, I said, agreeing without hesitation. My quick response caught Huxley off guard. He clearly didn't expect me to agree so easily. Little did he know, I had already made up my mind about leaving him. I even wanted to laugh at him in my head, because I knew what he was planning all along. Let me introduce myself. My name is Everly. I'm 43 years old, a housewife, and I live with my husband Huxley and our 7-year-old daughter, Lyric. Huxley and I met through a group blind date when I was 33. At the time, he seemed like the perfect guy, so easy to talk to and full of charm. Huxley was the most attractive man at the table that day. When he showed interest in me, I felt flattered and proud. I thought I had hit the jackpot. He was romantic and sweet in the beginning. During our early days of dating, he'd surprise me with fancy dinners and bouquets of flowers. He'd plan trips for our anniversaries and write me heartfelt letters. I was swept off my feet. I couldn't believe someone so thoughtful and charming wanted to be with me. So when Huxley proposed, I said yes without a second thought. I imagined a life full of love, surprises, and happiness even after marriage. But reality turned out to be very different. Hey, Everly, why isn't dinner ready yet? I've been working all day and you couldn't even make a meal? You're so lazy. That was the Huxley I married. After we got married, his sweet, caring side disappeared. He started treating me like I was a servant. At first, I thought he was joking. When we were dating, we used to laugh at silly jokes and call each other cute nicknames. I thought that's how our married life would be, fun, loving, and full of laughter. But it wasn't a joke. Huxley was serious. He saw me as someone whose only job was to take care of him. He expected me to do everything, clean the house, cook his meals, and cater to his every need. And if I didn't, he would make me feel worthless. After we got married, I had to quit my job because Huxley wanted me to stay home. I felt trapped. We depended on his income, so I didn't feel like I had a choice. His income wasn't great either. In fact, when I was working, I earned more than him. Huxley had only finished high school and never stayed at one job for long. He would quit every year or two, jumping from one job to another. I could tell he felt insecure about his unstable career, and he took out that frustration on me. I'm sorry, I got delayed running errands. I once told him when I was late starting dinner. Don't make excuses. Just hurry up and get it done, he replied, sitting on the couch with a cold beer. This kind of scene became normal in our house. He would complain, and I would silently do what he asked. My marriage felt like a prison, but I kept going. When our daughter Lyric was born the next year, my days became even harder. Taking care of Lyric was exhausting, and Huxley never helped. Sure, he spoiled her by buying her toys and candy, but when it came to real parenting, like feeding her, bathing her, or helping with school, he was nowhere to be found. I tried to raise Lyric properly, teaching her right from wrong, but that sometimes meant saying no to her. And every time I scolded her, she would run to Huxley for comfort. Lyric, you like Daddy more than Mommy, don't you? Huxley once asked her. Yeah, Daddy's so cool. I love Daddy. Lyric replied with a big smile. I knew it. I'm super dad, Huxley said smugly, giving me a triumphant look. It was frustrating, but I couldn't deny that Lyric loved her father. At least she had that. I sighed and let it go. Despite all his spoiling, Huxley rarely showed up for Lyric's important moments. When her kindergarten had events like sports festivals or recitals, Huxley always had some excuse. You know there's a parent-child race at Lyric's sports festival, I told him once. Could you participate? I asked Huxley casually. Why don't you go to the sports festival with Lyric? It's on a holiday, so you won't have to work. Without even looking at me, he responded coldly, you're free that day, so you do it. I tried to reason with him, but it's a great chance for us to bond as a family. Lyric would love it if both of us went together. Huxley didn't care. Shut up. We're already close enough. Maybe you should work on your relationship with Lyric instead. She thinks you're mean, you know? He laughed and left for work as if the conversation had no meaning. This was typical of Huxley. He liked to call himself Super Dad, yet he never showed up for Lyric's school events or spent real quality time with her. I was starting to worry about how Huxley's bad habits, being easy on himself but harsh on others, might affect Lyric as she grew up. At home, he continued to avoid responsibility, leaving all the housework and parenting to me. He spent most of his time lounging around, watching TV, or playing on his phone. Now Lyric was 5 and about to start elementary school. Despite her growing up, nothing changed with Huxley. He was still unreliable, still bouncing between jobs. Just last month, he quit his factory job and started working at a food and beverage company. I'll be working weekends at my new job because it's in the food industry, he said casually one evening. I tried to stay neutral. Looks like we won't see much of you on weekends then. It can't be helped. It's work, he replied, brushing off the topic. To be honest, I was relieved. If Huxley wasn't home on weekends, I wouldn't have to deal with his constant nagging about cleaning the floor or making meals quickly. But then I thought about Lyric. She loved spending time with her dad, and weekends were the only days we could all be together as a family. Huxley didn't seem to care. I have work, so you can let Lyric know I won't be around, he said without a hint of concern. Reluctantly, I went to tell Lyric the news. I expected her to be upset, so I tried to soften the blow. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but Daddy won't be able to spend weekends with us anymore because of his job. To my surprise, Lyric didn't seem bothered. It's okay, Mommy. If you're fine with it, I'm fine too, she said with a small smile. Then she added something unexpected. But Daddy has been smelling strange lately. Strange smell? I asked, confused. Lyric nodded, but didn't say much else. She just went back to her room, leaving me puzzled.
What was she talking about?
I realized I had been so busy with housework and taking care of Lyric that I hadn't paid much attention to Huxley lately. Our marriage wasn't what it used to be, and I often avoided being around him to keep the peace. Maybe Lyric was just picking up on something from his new job. It's probably from the factory, I thought to myself. Factories often use strong chemicals or solvents, so it wasn't unusual for workers to come home with odd smells. But deep down, something about Lyric's comment didn't sit right with me. As time passed, I noticed Huxley's behavior becoming stranger. Even on his days off, he started leaving the house early in the morning without telling me where he was going. If he was working weekends, shouldn't he have at least one day off during the week? One day, I decided to ask, Huxley, you've been going out a lot on your days off. What are you doing? He looked caught off guard for a moment, then answered in an annoyed tone, scratching his head. I'm working. I go involuntarily. Really? You should be careful. If you overwork yourself, your body won't hold up, I replied, trying to sound concerned. But Huxley snapped back. Shut up. Stop complaining about my job. His anger caught me off guard. Why was he so defensive? Huxley never showed this much dedication to work before. In fact, he was the type to avoid extra effort whenever possible. If he was so passionate about his job now, why hadn't he stayed longer at his previous ones? I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I started paying more attention to the strange smell Lyric mentioned. I began to notice it too, a sweet, strong fragrance that wasn't from the factory or any household product. Why hadn't I noticed it before? Was I too naive, too distracted by my daily struggles? I promised myself I wouldn't ignore my instincts anymore. From that point on, I decided to observe Huxley more carefully. I noticed patterns in his behavior. On certain weekdays, he woke up an hour earlier than usual. He took extra care grooming himself, shaving neatly, styling his hair, and even wearing cologne. On those mornings, he seemed unusually cheerful. It didn't happen every day, but it was consistent enough for me to take notice. Some weeks it was a Monday, other weeks a Thursday. But on these special days, Huxley left the house in a noticeably good mood. Curiosity got the better of me. One day, after Huxley left, I went into his room to look for clues. I felt like a detective sneaking around in Huxley's room, searching for clues. Since I always cleaned his room, I knew it well. I didn't feel guilty about snooping. I had every right to know what was going on. If Huxley was hiding something, he'd probably stash it in a spot that wasn't easy to find. I searched under the desk, behind furniture, and finally I checked the closet. Tucked away in an old candy tin, I found something unexpected. A stack of letters. My heart raced as I pulled them out and looked at the envelopes. All the letters were from someone named Patricia, and they had been mailed to Huxley. The letters ranged in date from 4 months ago to just yesterday. As I read through them, the contents were shocking. Phrases like, "I regretted when we broke up, but now I really love you and I want to go back to the time when we were together," caught my eye. They sounded like something a teenager in love would write. At first, I thought maybe Huxley's ex-girlfriend had been sending him these letters on her own. But then I read something that made my stomach drop. "I'm glad you like me again. I'm looking forward to our next date." This wasn't one-sided at all. Huxley was actively involved. The most recent letter was from last week, and it was clear they were seeing each other. Huxley wasn't just hiding something, he was cheating. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal. I quickly took photos of the letters with my phone, knowing I'd need proof. I thought about taking the letters themselves, but decided against it. If Huxley noticed they were missing, he'd become suspicious. Even with the letters, I wanted more evidence. After some thought, I decided to hire a private investigator to follow Huxley. 3 weeks later, the investigator handed me his findings. He had photos of Huxley and Juniper together at a park, sitting close on a bench. One photo showed them holding hands under the dim glow of a streetlight. Another was a recording of them saying, "I love you." Seeing those pictures and hearing those words was like a knife to my heart. But I stayed calm. The evidence was undeniable. Huxley was having an affair. With proof in hand, I went to the municipal office and got divorce papers. Now that I knew the truth, there was no reason to stay with him. I decided to confront Huxley with the papers the next time he tried to start an argument or gave me a reason to bring it up. I returned home, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. As much as I wanted to appear strong, my heart was broken. How could I have married someone so careless and selfish? I sighed deeply, deciding to rest before making dinner.
Just as I sat down, my phone rang.
"Hello," I answered. "Yes, Everly, it's your father. Do you have a moment to talk?" My father rarely called, so I was surprised. "Of course, Dad. Is everything okay?" "Well, your mother and I were talking last night. We've decided it's time to transfer our assets to you."
"What?"
"Why now?" My father ran a successful company that imported goods to Japanese corporations. Growing up, I'd been surrounded by wealth, but I never told Huxley about my family's fortune. I didn't want him to feel insecure, especially with his unstable job history. "We're getting older, Everly, and thinking about retiring. Your mother and I have decided not to keep the company running. We thought it best to pass our assets to you while we're still here." I felt a pang of guilt for not taking over the family business, but my parents had always respected my decisions. "Our total wealth is about $20 million, my father continued, "but we'll keep $6 million for ourselves. The remaining $18 million will go to you." $15 million? I gasped. The amount was far beyond anything I could have ever imagined earning in my lifetime.
"Yes."
"There will be some taxes, of course, but you'll still have plenty left. With this, you won't have to worry about money for the rest of your life." I thanked my father and mother, overwhelmed by their generosity. I couldn't believe how drastically my life was about to change. No matter what happened with Huxley, I knew I would be okay. Still reeling from the phone call, I glanced at the clock and realized it was 6 p.m. I needed to make dinner, but the fridge was empty. I grabbed my bag and headed to the supermarket. As I walked toward the store, my mind was racing. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. I had the means to leave Huxley and start fresh. But as I hurried across the last crosswalk, I heard someone yell, "Watch out." Before I could react, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in a hospital bed. The first thing I saw was my mother's worried face and Lyric crying beside her. "Everly, thank goodness you're awake," my mom exclaimed. I gently stroked Lyric's head, trying to comfort her. "You were hit by a car," my mother explained. "Both your legs are broken. The doctors say it will take about 5 months to recover." 5 months? The thought of being stuck in a wheelchair for that long made my head spin. From that day on, my life slowed to a crawl. While the nurses took care of me in the hospital, I couldn't help but feel frustrated and helpless. My parents took over caring for Lyric, which I was grateful for. Huxley, of course, was absent as usual, claiming he was too busy with work. I knew one thing for sure. As soon as I recovered, I'd make a fresh start. With or without Huxley, I was determined to rebuild my life. I was glad my parents and friends visited me at the hospital, but Huxley never showed up. As the days went by, I started to doubt if he cared about me at all. Aren't we husband and wife? Shouldn't he be here for me? I thought to myself. Finally, a week after my hospitalization, Huxley walked into my room. "Hey, feeling good?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I tried to keep things light. "Yes, but I hear it's a mess at home without me." Instead of showing empathy, Huxley launched into complaints about how difficult things were for him. I sighed deeply. I had hoped he'd come out of concern, but he was as cold and selfish as ever. "What can I do?" "I was in a car accident," I snapped, hoping he'd understand my frustration. Huxley looked at me with disdain. "You're useless if you can't handle housework or take care of Lyric."
"That's the worst," he said.
Then he added, "You should be paying me alimony." Hearing those cruel words from my own husband while I lay in a hospital bed was unbearable. I had held out a tiny hope that Huxley might care about me, but this visit crushed it. At that moment, I knew it was time to let go. In fact, I had already been thinking about divorce for a while. Huxley bringing it up now saved me the trouble of arguing. "Sure," I said calmly. Huxley looked startled by how quickly I agreed. Little did he know, I was already prepared. "Here's a divorce notice," I said, pulling out the completed form from my bag. My mother had brought it to the hospital earlier, and now it was time to use it. Huxley's eyes widened in confusion. "You already had this?" he asked. "Yes," I replied simply. Without much hesitation, Huxley took the paper from me and filled in his name and address. As he handed it back, I felt a huge sense of relief. Finally, I wouldn't have to see his face or hear his endless complaints ever again. Huxley left the hospital without another word. I sat there in silence, reflecting on what had just happened. He'll probably go marry Juniper now, I thought. I didn't know much about her, but it was sad to imagine anyone ending up with someone as controlling and unpleasant as Huxley. I felt guilty about Lyric, but I had been thinking about leaving Huxley for a long time. I promised myself that I would take good care of her and give her a happy life, even without her father. A month after Huxley left, my life felt peaceful. The quiet in the house was heavenly. There was no nagging, no complaints, and no tension. I was discharged from the hospital and began physical therapy to recover from my injuries. Until my legs healed, I stayed with my parents. My parents were furious when they heard about the divorce. They couldn't believe how Huxley had treated me, especially after learning about the affair. But they eventually let it go when I told them I just wanted to move on and forget about him. Lyric seemed happy too. She adjusted quickly to life without her father. She started elementary school with a big smile on her face. It was clear that even she had noticed Huxley's controlling behavior and no longer saw him as a loving father. I was convinced I had made the right decision. But one afternoon, my phone rang, interrupting the calm I had finally found. I looked at the screen and saw Huxley's name. I ignored the call, but it kept ringing. Finally, I answered, more out of annoyance than curiosity. "Hello," I said curtly. "Hey, Everly, when are you coming back?" Huxley's voice was demanding and filled with frustration. "What do you mean, coming back? Aren't you married to Juniper now?" I replied, confused by his question. There was a pause. Then Huxley stammered, "How do you know that? Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I knew you were cheating, Huxley. That's why I asked for alimony." Huxley's tone turned defensive. Yes, I cheated. But I can't pay alimony or child support. Why should I have to pay? You're the one who never did the housework properly. You should be paying me. I was stunned. What are you even saying, Huxley? I raised our daughter, managed the house, and put up with your complaints for years. Now you think I owe you monies? Huxley continued to argue, but his reasoning was absurd. Juniper can't cook or clean, he admitted bitterly. Before we got married, she said she'd handle everything, but now I see she's terrible at it. I made a mistake. I would have been better off staying with you. Marry me again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Huxley was actually asking me to take him back after everything he had done. Huxley, I said firmly, I divorced you because you treated me like a servant, not a wife. You never cared about me, Lyric, or our family. I don't care if Juniper doesn't cook or clean. You're her problem now, not mine. I've moved on and you should too. Before he could say another word, I hung up the phone. That call only confirmed that divorcing Huxley was the best decision I had ever made. I had spent too many years trying to please someone who would never appreciate me. Now, I was free to focus on Lyric and build a better life for both of us. Huxley was a chapter of my life that was finally closed, and I had no intention of reopening it. You don't have any money, right? Lyric liked me too, didn't she? Huxley said over the phone, his words filled with arrogance. His attitude annoyed me. What are you even talking about? You divorced me and remarried. Juniper's your partner now, not me. And by the way, Lyric doesn't like you. Huxley's voice grew defensive. Don't lie to me. There's no way you have money. You were a housewife. You can't survive without me. At first, I didn't want to tell Huxley about the fortune I inherited from my parents. It wasn't his business. But his aggressive attitude left me no choice. Let me set the record straight, I said calmly. My parents are CEOs of a large company. Recently, I inherited their assets, which total around $55 million. So, trust me, I can live comfortably without working for the rest of my life. I could almost picture Huxley's jaw dropping on the other end of the phone. After a long pause, he said, You're lying. There's no way you have that much money. It's the truth. If you don't believe me, I can have my parents confirm it, I replied firmly. Huxley fell silent, but then he exploded. If it's true, why didn't you tell me? I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. Well, I wanted to tell you, but when I learned about your affair, I realized there was no point. At that time, I hadn't yet inherited the money, so there was no issue of splitting assets. You cheated and treated me terribly. I didn't owe you anything. Huxley let out a frustrated sigh, clearly regretting his actions. He probably wished he had stayed married to me now that he knew about my wealth. But I was done with him. Can I hang up now? I asked. Please pay the alimony properly. Reflect on your actions, and don't ever call me again.
Goodbye.
Before he could respond, I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. Mom, who are you talking to? Lyric walked into the room, looking curious. Just a friend, I said with a smile. Then I asked, Lyric, do you want to go to the amusement park this weekend? Her face lit up. Yes, she exclaimed happily. Seeing her smile reminded me that her happiness was all that truly mattered. A few days later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Huxley's new marriage had fallen apart. He and Juniper argued constantly, mainly because Juniper refused to do housework. She eventually left him. Huxley had now been divorced twice in a short period. I doubted he'd find it easy to remarry. I hoped he'd take some time to reflect and stay single for a while, if only to prevent someone else from getting hurt. After the breakup, Huxley seemed to lose all motivation. He quit his job at the restaurant and was reportedly struggling to find a new one. I felt a tiny bit sorry for him, but his problems were entirely his own doing. Despite his struggles, Huxley eventually paid the alimony, though it left him in debt. I didn't know how he would manage, but I had no intention of helping him. I blocked all his attempts to contact me, ensuring he couldn't ask me for money. I also avoided places we used to go together. To me, Huxley had practically disappeared from my life. With Huxley out of the picture, my life was finally peaceful. My parents let me and Lyric stay with them as long as we wanted, and their support made all the difference. Once my legs fully healed, I decided to start working part-time at a local flower shop. While I didn't need to work because of my inheritance, I enjoyed being active and leaving the house. It gave me a sense of purpose and normalcy. On weekdays, I worked hard at the shop, arranging flowers and chatting with customers. On weekends, I spent quality time with Lyric and my parents. We went to parks, played games, and sometimes just relaxed at home. Each moment felt precious, and I was grateful for this new chapter in my life. Seeing Lyric smile made all the struggles worthwhile. Now, I cherish every day. My focus is on creating happy memories with the people I love. The past may have been painful, but it taught me to value the joy I have today.